Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Chee-Tash. My name is Chris, and today we are going to be talking about the four agreements, going over the introduction as well as chapter one to this very, very good book. I read this book a few weeks ago, about middle of May, on my way to Arizona. Finished it on the trip. It was a quick read. It's only about like 150 pages, or excuse me, even less than that. It's like about 120, 130 pages. Very short book. I finished it that weekend, and I am glad I brought it with me to Arizona. This was a very, very good book, a very thought-provoking book that was a little different than what I expected it to be. And a lot of that stems from what we're going to be talking about here in the introduction and chapter one here, just in this beginning part of the book. This kind of sets the stage for what is an agreement, because you're probably wondering right now, like, hey, what is the four agreements? What are we agreeing on here? Well, this agreement is going to be something that is carried with you your whole life. You have agreements with you right now. That's what you have to understand. This is a very popular book, self-help, personal development type of book. I didn't realize how old it was. It was first published in 1997, so it's been around for a while. I'd heard of it before, decided to read it and go over it with you guys. And without further ado, let's just start things off with the introduction, which is entitled The Smoky Mirror, and we're going to talk about kind of what this is. The author, Don Miguel Ruiz, go to that page, kind of starts off talking about how long time ago there was a human being out there that lived near a city surrounded by mountains, and the human was studying to become a medicine man. And he's studying to become a medicine man. He thinks there's something more out there. One day he's sleeping outside in a cave, and he dreams that he sees his body sleeping one night. Almost kind of like the way I interpret this is he's having an out-of-body experience. And what he says, he says that he sees, from the dream, he learns that I am made of light and that I am made of stars. There's millions of stars in the galaxy. We're all made of the same thing. It's this thing called light. I mean, I shouldn't say that like that's anything surprising. Like, we all know what light is, right? So is that everything is made of light, and there's space in between the objects that are made of light, but it's not necessarily empty space. Not necessarily empty space. And he knew that, and I'm reading here from the introduction, and he knew that everything that exists is one living being, and that the light is the messenger of life because it is alive and contains all information. So the light is used to transport messages. It's the connection between other things. I have light, you have light, and the space in between us is like the information superhighway. It's not empty. You know, I've heard like Nikola Tesla describe like the ether before. I've heard that term before from stuff I've listened to. So there's like this ether in between us. Let's continue forward. I am in between the stars, he thought. So he called the stars the tonal, and the light between the stars the nagual. So we got stars are the tonal, light between the stars is a nagual. And there's this sort of harmony between these two. And that harmony is called life or intent. And this is kind of used interchangeably. Life is intent. Your intentions bring life. I guess that's the best way to look at it. I think I got one for it. And then everything is God. He sees God in everything. So God and light. Think about like if you're Christian and you read the Bible, I believe you hear things describe God that are pretty pervasive throughout the Bible, like light. So everything is God, everything is light. Look at what Don Miguel Ruiz is talking about here. Everything is made of light, so therefore everything is God. And perception is light perceiving light, which kind of makes sense. So I'm light, you're light. Everything in between us is that information superhighway. And my perception is my light perceiving your light. Okay. So we kind of have a good structure here. And then he talks about mirrors. Talks about mirrors. Matter is a mirror. And what does he say about this, the mirrors? Oh, right. Okay. He could hardly wait to tell his people what he had discovered, but there were no words to explain it. He tried to tell the others, but they could not understand. They could see that he had changed, that something beautiful was radiating from his eyes and his voice. They noticed that he no longer had judgment about anything or anyone. He was no longer like anyone else. Nobody could really understand him. So this guy that's training to be a medicine man, he realizes all these things. He's trying to tell everybody. They don't really get it. And I know I've probably beaten this comparison so many times, especially when we talk about Man's Search for Meaning. If you guys haven't seen those episodes, go back and watch that. There's like a matrix, right? You're trying to tell people, but they're so in tune with what they already know. They're already present agreements that it's hard for them to understand where you're coming from. They don't really get you. Right? And he kind of talks about this mirror. He was a mirror. He had discovered that he was a mirror for the rest of the people, a mirror in which he could see himself. Everyone is a mirror, he said. He saw himself in everyone, but nobody saw him as themselves. So he sees himself in everyone, but nobody saw him as themselves. And that's when he realized everybody was dreaming. And then this is where we talk about the dream of humans. Let's continue. Next slide here. I think I have it. Oh, this is just kind of a continuation. Everyone is a mirror. A fog can blind us from this mirror. So it kind of, nobody sees themselves in him because there's this fog that's blinding them. And this fog is blinding that mirror. And he calls this the dream of humans. And this dream of humans is kind of what is going to take us to the domestication and the dream of the planet and kind of what this means. This is all kind of leading into this. So the dream of humans is kind of interchangeable with this domestication. All right, so Don Miguel Ruiz talks about everybody is dreaming right now. You are dreaming right now. Dreams can happen when the mind is awake or when the mind is asleep. And you have like your personal dreams, and then you have society's dream or this outside dream, which is, the outside dream, society's dream, or the dream of the planet. And this dream hooks your attention. Attention is the ability to discriminate and to focus only on that which we want to perceive. And this dream is where rules are established. So these rules hook your attention, and they have most of your attention hooked on it. So it's very hard to break free from it. Repetition is used to enforce that attention, so that this outside dream is the only thing that you are perceiving. And one of the first ways that this is done is when you are taught a language, which is the communication between humans. First thing you are taught, and there are other ways in which this is taught: language, culture, morals, religion. Language is one of the first ones to do it. One of the first things that is taught, and every letter and every word in that language is called an agreement. And then those are all compiled together in something called a page. Similar to what, like a page in a book has words, letters. These are like all of your agreements. So if I were kind of to describe what an agreement is your attention and I'm trying not to use the word agree here. Your attention on the outside dream, or your attention on rules that are a part of the dream. Right? Is that probably the best way? Here, let's see if I have a definition here. We agree with the information that is passed on to us. Right, so the things that are passed on to you in this outside dream, the things that hook your attention and that you live your life by. Maybe that's the best way to describe what an agreement is here. Once we agree, we believe, and that is called faith. And when it starts out really, really young, and as you grow older, that faith becomes stronger and stronger because it's all you've had your attention hooked on. So when we talk about the domestication of humans, or when Don Miguel Ruiz talks about this domestication of humans, it's that they are all living this dream according to the outside dream, society's dream, and they're surrendering to the agreements that are a part of that dream. And that this is done by using punishments and rewards. So you are punished if you go against these agreements, and you're rewarded if you go towards these agreements or you accept the agreements. All right, and that's what's reinforced, and over time you can see how strong these agreements become. So why does this happen? Well, it happens and the biggest example of this is like with your parents and what your parents teach you. And I'm not saying, and I don't think the author here is saying like that's inherently like a bad thing. It just kind of is what it is. And that's how I'm going to interpret it. It's not necessarily a bad thing, because you want to please others. You want to follow the agreements set forth by your parents, even though you might not want to do them. Right? And as you grow older, you start to rebel against them. And then you grow older and you're out on your own and you form your own agreements. Sometimes they are very hard to break. And the way you break them is what Don Miguel Ruiz is going to be talking about, is you start to accept and take on 4 agreements, these 4 agreements that we'll be talking about in this book. So you want to please others. You want to accept these agreements because you don't want to be rejected. And humans are naturally like we are very tribal. We want to be a part of a group. We're afraid of rejection because now, as survival instincts kick in from, I'm sure, years and years of human evolution, when we're rejected from a tribe, the chances of our survival decrease. So we want to please others. And at some point, the external things that keep us in line and keep us to these agreements they're still strong, but over time, we become our own domesticators internally. That surpasses whatever externally is trying to get you to agree to this overall domestication of humans, this outside dream. Do I have another point here? Nope, next slide here. So now let me go to this page, the Book of the Law. So the Book of the Law is what contains, the author talks about here, that contains all of these rules or your belief system, all of these agreements. And it's like the source of truth. We base all of our judgments according to the Book of the Law. It's kind of like the 10 Commandments, your very own 10 Commandments, right? And it's very, very safe. This is the safe thing. Just follow this book of law. This is what's been followed your whole life. If you follow the principles in this, it's going to lead to safety. Lead to safety. You know, it's tried and true. Don't try to break it. But what often happens is that we end up judging ourselves based on this book of law. And everything lives under the tyranny of this judge. Every time we do something that goes against the book of law, the judge says we are guilty and we need to be punished. This happens many times a day, day after day, for all the years of our lives. So you really live these two lives according to the book of the law. You're the judge of the book of the law. Judge, jury, executioner. Well, so you're the judge, so that means that you levy the punishments for when you break the agreements of this book of the law. And then you live this other life of the victim that feels ashamed and guilty. And your memory serves as something that's very powerful and doesn't let you forget all the transgressions that you did over the course of your life that went against this book of the law. So you end up being the judge and the victim multiple times. This happens every day, maybe even every hour, but it happens very often in your life. And the author talks about here how humans are the only animal that can pay thousands of times for the same mistake. And let me give you an example of this, because I do this all the time, where I'll think about mistakes I made in the past. I've gotten better at this. I would say that I used to dwell on my mistakes. Now, I still think about them from now and again, and I just get kind of upset at myself, like, oh yeah, I did that. Like, you know, I'm trying to think of like an example. Like back when I was experiencing like all this, my very troubled times in like 2017, like super, super anxious, high anxiety, like having like anxiety issues. And I think back to that, I'm like, God, why did I go through that? Like, I feel like I could have done something so differently, you know. But I don't dwell on it. It's more like I just kind of let it go. Like, I accept it for what it is and I let it go. I've gotten better at that, but I used to really beat myself up about it. And other animals, you know, you put your hand on the stove, it burns you, and you learn not to do it again, kind of sort of thing that he's getting here. So when you make a mistake, this is kind of the process that you go through. The judge levies the punishment. It marks you as guilty. And then it causes your mind, you to punish your own self. And then something else comes along, or then you rehash that memory and you become the judge again. And you follow the same process. Judge, guilty, punish. Judge, guilty, punish. And it's hard to break free of that. You're living these two lives, again, judge and victim. And what the author kind of talks about here is that this is very similar to like the picture of hell that a lot of religions talk about, where it's like fire and brimstone. And what the author says here is that fire is generated by emotion, fear. Whenever we feel the emotions of anger, jealousy, envy, or hate, we experience a fire burning within us. We are living in a dream of hell. And this is kind of what we experience day in, day out, living this outside dream. And then we come to this term of the fog, where there's this fog around us that does not let us see very far in front of us. The author says you could like barely see out from what's past, like beyond your nose. This is called a metote. And everything you believe runs from here. So all you see is in this little bubble that's like barely outstretched, like from your arms. You live in your own little bubble. So it's hard to see everything else that's outside of it. outside of this dream that you are living. And he talks about our biggest fears to be alive, to go outside of this bubble. This is kind of like my interpretation of it. Our biggest fear is to be alive, because that would require you to venture outside of this fog, outside of this dream. Or the fog is blocking you, like a potential new dream from the dream that you are living currently, or from the dream that society that you are living, the dream of society that you are living, society's dream. So think about how much courage that would be to venture outside of the fog where you don't even see beyond it. Think about how much courage that would take. Let's see, do I have another bullet point here? Yes, I do. We form images of how to be accepted by everybody else. So what the author kind of says here is that we have this image of perfection that is never attainable, so we continuously beat ourselves up over it. And I wrote that second bullet point there. We have kind of set ourselves up to fail, and we reject ourselves. And worse, we hold other people to that same standard. So when other people don't live up to that state of perfection, we judge them as well. I used to do this all the time. Maybe I still do. Yeah, you know what? I still do. Although I think I have gotten better at it. So again, it's that judge and victim. And then you start judging other people. And that is not very good. So how do you break out of this? Well, you got to break the old agreements that are fear-based. Fear-based. They keep you within the fog. Keep you living society's dream. And you have to have a lot of personal power to break these old agreements. A lot of personal power, but it's hard to muster that because, and this is kind of what I think about when you're like working throughout the day and the energy. I remember somebody saying, I was reading this somewhere about the energy that you put into like work or craft or like learning something throughout the day. It's like a gas tank, and yeah, you could maybe do it from like 9 to 5, but it's hard to do it after hours. I'm discovering that right now when I try to do things after hours, and I'm trying to code after hours. It's hard sometimes. It sucks. It can suck sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to do it. And it's very tough, but you got to push past it. That's kind of really the only way. One of the only ways. I'm sure there's other ways. So in this case, we have that personal power, but most of that power goes to, first of all, creating all the past agreements that you have, agreeing with all of society's agreements in that dream, upholding them, so you have little personal power left over to create new agreements. It's very hard. But what the author is going to be talking about, and this kind of like brings us to the end of this introduction in chapter 1, is that there's these 4 agreements that will help you break the old ones and bring back your energy. And what are they? I mean, I can give you guys a little preview here. He talks about them right on like the front flap, the front cover here. Be impeccable with your word, number 1. Don't take anything personally, number 2. Don't make assumptions, number 3. Always do your best, number 4. So that's kind of a little preview of what those agreements are going to be, and I believe this is the last. Yes, sir, this is the last slide. Thank you guys so much if you listen this far. We're going to be back at this next week as well. Bell curve, I'm going to make another video about it. That's going to be put on hiatus until I eclipse a certain amount of views on it. So I'd like to see how interested you guys are in that video, and if the interest is garnered, I'll start putting out videos for that again. I am very close to finishing that book, but wanted to get this one out there for you guys because I really like this book, The 4 Agreements. I think you will too. And we'll just continue on with it next week with chapter 1 or chapter 2, talking about be impeccable with your word. Thank you guys very much for listening. If you have any questions, comments, want to start a discussion, leave them in the comments section of the video. My name is Chris. This has been Chee-Tash. Take care.